Hey folks, how you doing? I thought I would talk about half knowledge and self creation. Or self creation is required to, let's say, to get away from the tentacles of self knowledge, the problems that half knowledge brings on us. Not self knowledge, my mistake. Half knowledge. Well, self knowledge is what people need. So, half knowledge has been called the devil's workshop because all sorts of problems occur as a result of an uncontrolled cerebral cortex, half knowledge. The cerebral cortex, uncontrolled, leads to all sorts of problems such as fear, hatred, pride, esteem, feelings of self-importance. All these things are non-virtues. It don't seem like it because we have been taught. The teacher in school will say, "Oh well, this child has no self-esteem." You know what I mean? Well, okay. In the future, that self-esteem may cause the person, the child, or as an adult, problems. So does pride. Pride to turn around and bite you. Yeah, you see. So, half knowledge, okay, leads us to all sorts of problems. And it needs to be controlled. The cerebral cortex needs to be controlled, you see. And this may very well require knowledge of self, you see. And when we let the cerebral cortex go on its own way, uncontrolled by the person who possesses it, you see, it eventually turns against the person. For example, this is when, let's say, pride turns around and bites a person. The person's consciousness is turning against him or her. A sad situation. It brings on stress and all that comes of stress. But the first human beings, way back there, the original humans, they didn't have this difficulty. It's the so-called modern folks who have these difficulties. And the early humans didn't have these difficulties simply because they didn't have a cerebral cortex. Yeah. The first humans didn't have the cerebral cortex. So they wasn't concerned, they didn't have any concern about all the problems that affect humans today, you see. And so they went about their lives doing what they actually needed to do. Find food and water to drink and stay out of the path of the ferocious beasts that seem to have always lived in their environment. These were their concerns, you see. And they did well because they didn't have all the thoughts, etc., parading through their mind like humans do today, because the ancient folks, didn't have the cerebral cortex. They wasn't involved with attempts at reasoning or half reasoning or whatnot, which seems to go over today, half reasoning. So they didn't have these problems. So now it turns out that people who want to get into themselves, self-knowledge, many of them turn to what you may call religious practices, spiritual practices like yoga, etc. And an attempt to put their cerebral cortex to sleep. For a time, not forever. For a time. Put the cerebral cortex asleep, and guess what? This then renders them in the same state of consciousness that the ancient folks are in when they hadn't even grown a cerebral cortex yet. See? So when people seek self-knowledge, or when people seek to alter their consciousness, they put the cerebral cortex to sleep. To signify this, we see in some of the ancient drawings, especially with the Egyptians, that they had a band around here, the so-called gods. Some of them just didn't have the top part of their head, but then somewhere a band around their head, you see, separating, you see, the cerebral cortex, the higher part of the brain, from the lower part of the brain, indicating that they weren't relying on the cerebral cortex, or that they had the cerebral cortex under control. You see. So when people strive to go into themselves to acquire self-knowledge, yes, they don't rely on the cerebral cortex. They rely on going in. Or you can say in meditation or a state of trance, mild state of trance, etc. This allows them to get in touch with the self, the inner self. And through this, they have their realizations. Realizing what they are, realizing their place in cosmos, or here on Earth, but in cosmos in general, because the humans knew, and we know today, that we are affected by celestial bodies, especially the sun and the moon. We can say they are cosmic entities. They're not here on Earth, but their effects are here on Earth. So we can at least be happy that our ancient ancestors didn't have a cerebral cortex. They eventually grew one. But they got their start, they didn't have one. They weren't confused about anything like folks are today, or folks with half knowledge. Okay. So to overcome this half knowledge deal, people found that they could raise within themselves an entity which we can refer to as the mystical child. Okay? And this child is raised up within, just like Jesus is raised up. And this is what the Jesus tradition is about. Is raised up to the Christhood. Now, there are many other traditions, you know. The Hebrews have their tradition. Africans, like the Doggone Society and other societies in Africa, they still engage these practices. The Hindus, the many, many Hindu cults, they have their practices. And when a person seeks to go into meditation, he seeks to engage the inner self, you see. And to eradicate all the nonsense that half knowledge brings with it. All the nonsense that an uncontrolled cerebral cortex brings with it, you see. So people with this half knowledge situation have set a pattern, okay? When, for example, the folks come down from the north to invade the civilizations of the south. See, it has happened over and over again. That happened in colonial times. They brought the Afro-American to America. This is all half knowledge. People say, oh yeah, those people are smart. No, half knowledge drove them to do this. Greed. Okay? We can identify with half knowledge. Then the colonial period, where countries went all over the world taking what other nations had. That's half knowledge. Now, it may appear to us that those people were brilliant, smart, and so forth and so on. If they were so smart, they wouldn't have had to take other people's money or fortunes and so forth and so on. They would have had their own. They would acquire their own the same way that the folks who they were robbing, same way they acquired theirs. But they didn't have the knowledge. They had half knowledge. And half knowledge drives people to do all sorts of things. They are destructive. Half knowledge is destructive. Okay, folks. Nice having this talk today. And more will be coming. Okay. Have a good one. All right. Bye-bye.